Hey friends, welcome back. Today we're jumping right back into some entitled people stories. Ever watch someone step over a line and just keep going? In these three stories, that's exactly what happened, and in every case, reality hit back harder than expected. Stick around because the point isn't the individual chaos, it's what happens when you line them up and see the same behavior playing out at three very different levels. Block my driveway, catch a tow truck. When my kids got home from school that afternoon, the first message I received wasn't the usual, "We're home," or "What's for dinner?" Instead, my phone buzzed with a photo and a short text. "There's a car blocking the driveway. We can't pull in." I opened the picture and immediately felt my jaw tighten. Sure enough, some random sedan was parked squarely across the end of our driveway, blocking it completely. Like whoever left it there genuinely didn't care that an actual family lived here. I recognized the car almost immediately. This wasn't just some careless stranger. I texted the photo to my neighbor, the husband of the woman I had ongoing issues with, and asked if he knew anything about it. A few moments later, he replied that it belonged to his soon-to-be ex-sister-in-law and that he was surprised she parked it there. The word surprise did a lot of heavy lifting. I told him flat out that my kids were stuck, that blocking a driveway was illegal, and that he needed to tell her to move her car immediately. He said he would handle it. I gave it 10 minutes, 10 full minutes with my kids waiting in the street, cars driving by, and me watching the clock tick closer to the point where patience turns into obligation. No sister-in-law, no movement, no apology. At that point, I didn't have time for whatever personal drama she was playing out, so I called the non-emergency police line and reported a vehicle blocking residential access to a driveway. While I was on the phone, my son called me and put me on speaker. He told me the police had already arrived and were inspecting the situation. An officer confirmed the car was illegally parked and radioed for a tow truck. I could hear everything through my phone as if I were standing there myself. The tow truck arrived quickly, backed up, and started hooking the car like this was a routine Tuesday, which for them it probably was. That's when the screaming started. Out of nowhere, a loud, shrill voice cut through the background noise, yelling, "Put my car down right now!" The sister-in-law finally made her dramatic entrance, sprinting toward the tow truck like she just realized consequences were happening in real time. The officers calmly explained that her car was blocking a driveway and that the tow was already authorized. She immediately started arguing, insisting she was only there for a minute, which was impressive considering we were well past that mark. Those 10 minutes she gave them were the final chance she offered, and it was more than fair. When the neighbor said he'd handle it and nothing happened, it was a clear message that they didn't take your family's access seriously. Calling the police was the logical consequence after their inaction ran out the clock. One of the officers even tried to de-escalate the situation. He told her that if she didn't have the money to retrieve the car immediately, they could offer her a ride to the impound lot so she could sort it out. That generosity lasted about 3 seconds. Instead of taking the offer, she stepped directly in front of the tow truck driver and tried to open her car door while it was still hooked up. The officer stopped her and told her to step back. She didn't. She pushed, flailed, and started shouting about how unfair this was, how everyone was against her, and how she wasn't doing anything wrong. My son's voice on the phone went quiet for a second before he said, "Mom, she just hit the cop." That was the moment everything escalated from embarrassing to criminal. The officers restrained her quickly. She fought back, screaming the entire time, which earned her additional charges on the spot. Assaulting an officer and interfering with a lawful tow are not minor mistakes, and they treated them accordingly. While her car was driven away on the tow truck, she was placed in the back of a patrol car and taken to the police station. I listened to the entire thing unfold through my phone, stunned but not shocked. Later that evening, once things calmed down, I felt like I needed to clarify something important because this wasn't an isolated incident with some random relative. This woman is the sister of my now ex-neighbor, the same neighbor who last year deliberately sent this exact sister to trespass on my property in an attempt to use my pool without consent. This wasn't a misunderstanding, this was a pattern. She's also the same woman who just days earlier tried to intercept a package delivered to my house and claim it was hers, despite the label clearly having my name and address on it. When that didn't work, she escalated again by calling the town and falsely reporting that trees on my property needed to be cut down even though they were perfectly healthy and not in violation of any ordinance. Every move felt calculated, petty, and rooted in entitlement. So when people ask if I feel bad about what happened with the tow, the answer is simple: no. Blocking a driveway isn't an accident. Ignoring requests to move isn't a misunderstanding. Fighting police officers because you don't like the outcome is a choice. She made several of them back to back, and the result was exactly what you'd expect. The driveway's clear now. My kids can come and go without obstruction. The tow company got paid. The police did their job. And as far as I'm concerned, if she ever shows up again, she already taught everyone involved exactly how to handle it. And our second story. A lesson in car safety delivered by a concerned stranger. Don't do that again. This happened around lunchtime a few years ago, and every time I think about it, my brain still short-circuits a little. I was stopped at a stop sign, minding my own business, top down on my convertible because it was one of those rare, perfect days where the weather tricks you into believing the universe isn't actively hostile. Traffic was light, radio on low, nothing remarkable happening. That's probably why what came next felt so unreal. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a woman standing on the corner suddenly break into a sprint toward my car. Before I could even process what she was doing, she was already at the passenger side, yelling something about needing to get home. I didn't even get a chance to respond. She swung one leg over the door like she was mounting a horse, dropped straight into the passenger seat, and said, "I'll give you $5 for gas." No question, no pause, just assumption. She told me she lived in a nearby public housing project about 1.5 miles away. I knew the place. I also knew she looked pretty tweaked out, jittery, unfocused. The kind of energy that makes your instincts light up like a dashboard full of warning icons. But here's the weird part. She didn't look at me, not once. She didn't scan the car, didn't size me up, didn't rummage around. She just stared forward like I was an Uber she'd already paid for and mentally checked out. This is the part where I fully acknowledge my own questionable decision-making. In that moment, my brain did the fastest cost-benefit analysis imaginable and landed on a terrible conclusion. It would be easier to just drive her where she wanted to go than to escalate things by trying to force a stranger out of my car. I didn't know how she'd react if I yelled, or if she'd freak out, or if she'd suddenly turn aggressive. My personal emergency plan for carjackings has always been simple. Drive into the nearest telephone pole, or rear end the first police car I see and let airbags and paperwork sort it out. Better bruised than dumped somewhere you don't get found. So I drove. You didn't know if she was on drugs, armed, or dangerous. The easiest way to avoid a violent confrontation in a closed, vulnerable space like a car was to just keep moving. It wasn't logic, it was instinct. You chose the path of least resistance in a moment where you felt you had no control. The entire ride was silent. She didn't talk, didn't offer directions, didn't say thank you. She just sat there, vibrating slightly, hands in her lap, staring straight ahead. It was broad daylight, busy streets, people around, and that helped keep my nerves from fully unraveling. When we pulled up in front of the main entrance to the housing project, she suddenly sprang into action, hopped out of the car, and took off without a word. No $5, no acknowledgement, nothing. What actually annoyed me the most in that moment wasn't even the whole stranger commandeered my car thing. It was that she left the passenger door wide open, stretched to its absolute limit like she'd never closed a car door in her life. I sighed, unbuckled, and stepped out to walk around and shut it. That's when a silver pickup rolled up beside me. An older guy leaned over and rolled down his passenger window. He looked genuinely concerned. "Hey," he said, "do you know that woman? You okay?" I told him no, I had no idea who she was, and yes, I was fine. Still a little shaken, but fine. He nodded slowly, then explained that he'd been driving behind me when he saw her jump into my car. He said it didn't sit right with him, so he followed us the whole way to make sure nothing sketchy happened. That realization hit harder than anything else that day. A complete stranger saw something wrong, decided not to ignore it, and quietly made sure I got where I was going without being harmed. I thanked him, probably a little too emphatically, and told him that was one hell of a decent thing to do. He waved it off like it was nothing. Then his tone changed. He squinted at me, pointed a finger straight at my face, and said, "I'd have punched that bee right out of my truck." No hesitation, no humor, just pure conviction. Then he added, like a disappointed father delivering a final warning, "Don't do that again." I laughed, partly from nerves and partly because he was absolutely right. "Yes, sir," I told him, and I meant it. Looking back, the whole thing still blows my mind. The entitlement it takes to just climb into a stranger's car because you've decided you need a ride is staggering. That woman had no idea who I was, what kind of person I might be, or how that situation could have ended if she'd picked the wrong vehicle. She got lucky, really lucky. And I did too, in a different way. I didn't get robbed, I didn't get hurt, I didn't even get $5, but I did get a very clear reminder that just because a situation ends without disaster doesn't mean it wasn't a terrible idea. If something like that ever happens again, and I sincerely hope it doesn't, I won't be driving anyone anywhere. Some lessons are better learned once, preferably without a stranger already buckled into your passenger seat. The man in the truck gave you two gifts, his protection during the ride and the hard, clear lesson after. His blunt advice, "I'd have punched her out, and don't do that again," wasn't macho nonsense. It was a real-world strategy for reclaiming your space and safety from the start. His kindness gave you the space to learn that your de-escalation worked, but his honesty taught you that it shouldn't be your go-to plan. And our last story. Neighbor and crooked lawyer forged my grandmother's signature on legal documents, took her money, and sold her house. This happened last winter, and for a long time it honestly felt like we were trapped in someone else's nightmare. The kind where every time you think you've hit the bottom, the floor drops out again. My grandmother slipped on black ice outside her house and went down hard. The fall was brutal. She shattered her hip and broke her leg, and by the time the ambulance got her to the hospital, it was clear the situation wasn't going to be a simple fix-and-go-home situation. She needed surgery immediately, followed by months of rehabilitation. She was in her late 70s, but mentally sharp as ever, cracking jokes even through the pain. Physically, though, she was suddenly very vulnerable. Knowing she wouldn't be home for a long time, I handled the practical stuff. I shut off the water and electricity so nothing would freeze or rack up unnecessary bills. She lived in a rural area, so I started picking up her mail from her P.O. box and drove by the house every few days just to make sure everything looked the same. At first it did. The driveway was empty, the house locked up, nothing out of place. I thought we had things under control. After surgery, she was transferred to a rehab facility. That's when the first red flag popped up. We got a call saying her insurance had stopped paying. The tone was polite but concerned. The kind of call that makes your stomach drop before the person even finishes their sentence. According to their records, her coverage had been terminated. That made absolutely no sense. She'd had the same insurance for years, paid automatically, no changes, no missed payments. I started making phone calls. While trying to sort that out, I found something far worse. A bank statement arrived showing that every single one of my grandmother's accounts had been drained. Not partially, completely. Checking, savings, everything she had set aside for retirement and medical care, gone. I remember staring at the numbers, rereading the page over and over, convinced I had to be misunderstanding something. We took her to the bank in person, which was physically painful for her, but necessary. That's where we got the explanation that made my hand start shaking. The teller told us the withdrawals were authorized by her attorney. Apparently, her lawyer had transferred the funds legally. My grandmother looked at her and said very clearly, "I don't have a lawyer." When your grandmother said, "I don't have a lawyer," that was the moment the whole story cracked open. It revealed that someone had invented an entire legal fiction, a fake attorney, fake documents, and the bank had accepted it as truth. That sentence was the first domino to fall, showing you this wasn't a mistake. That's when the real digging began. We discovered a stack of legal documents supposedly signed by my grandmother, granting full financial and property control to a neighbor and a lawyer she had never met. Power of attorney, property authority, everything. These signatures looked like hers at first glance, but she was adamant she'd never signed them. This wasn't confusion, this wasn't memory loss. She was furious and terrified in equal measure. Then we noticed the date. Every single document was signed on the exact day she was in surgery under anesthesia in a hospital 3 hours away from her home. Despite that, there was an affidavit from the neighbor claiming my grandmother had signed everything at her kitchen table that afternoon, lucid and cheerful. While we were still trying to process that level of audacity, my grandmother's condition worsened again, and she was sent back to the hospital. A few days went by where none of us checked the house. We assumed it was still locked up and untouched. That assumption was wrong. My cousin went by the house to grab some winter clothes and immediately called me, voice shaking. There were cars in the driveway, lights on, people inside, strangers. When he knocked, they answered the door and told him they owned the place. Inside, everything was different. New furniture, new locks. My grandmother's furniture, jewelry, keepsakes, and personal items were gone. Decades of her life erased in a matter of weeks. The only things left were photo albums, which the occupants immediately handed back once they realized something was very wrong. They showed us the paperwork. The title was in their names. There was a mortgage, a real estate agent, closing documents. Everything looked legitimate on the surface. The buyers were shaken when they heard the story and cooperated fully. The agent was horrified and immediately started pulling emails, timelines, and records, clearly realizing she'd been used. When we confronted the neighbor, she suddenly claimed she knew nothing about any of it. She said she was just helping an elderly woman manage things. That claim fell apart instantly when we noticed she was wearing my grandmother's heirloom ring, a piece that never left her hand and was supposed to be locked in the house. The lawyer, meanwhile, vanished. No returned calls, no emails, total silence. And here's the part that nearly broke us. My grandmother now had no access to her money, no active insurance, no house, and no ability to hire a lawyer of her own. For a while, it felt like the system had completely failed her. She lay in a hospital bed having survived surgery and trauma, only to find out someone had tried to erase her entire life while she was unconscious. Then, finally, something went right. The bank's internal fraud team flagged the withdrawals because of the timing and the amounts. Once hospital records, surgical logs, and affidavits were compared, law enforcement got involved fast. The timeline didn't just look bad, it was damning. The Law Society stepped in and came down hard. It turned out this lawyer had a history of questionable behavior involving elderly clients. Not all at once, not as dramatic, but enough that once investigators started pulling threads, the whole thing unraveled. His license was suspended almost immediately. His trust accounts were frozen. The neighbor panicked and hired her own lawyer, which did absolutely nothing to help her. Criminal charges followed quickly: forgery, fraud, theft, conspiracy. The house sale was unwound in court. The buyers were fully protected, their mortgage voided, their money returned, and additional compensation provided through insurance and restitution funds. The house was legally restored to my grandmother. The lawyer was disbarred and later sentenced. The neighbor lost her own home as part of the restitution and now carries criminal convictions and civil judgments that'll follow her for the rest of her life. Most importantly, my grandmother got her money back, not all at once, but enough. Between restitution, insurance coverage, and victims' compensation funds, her care was secured. She moved into assisted living safely, on her own terms, without fear of losing everything again. She still talks about it sometimes, shaking her head in disbelief that someone she waved to for years could do something so calculated and cruel. Then she straightens up and says, "They thought I was weak." She smiles when she finishes the sentence. They were wrong. Across all three stories, the same assumption shows up. If I act like this is allowed, no one will stop me. In the driveway story, entitlement shows up as inconvenience. Someone blocks access, ignores requests, and assumes everyone else will just work around them until enforcement arrives and the whole act collapses. In the car story, entitlement becomes physical. A stranger doesn't ask for help, she takes it. The danger isn't just her behavior, but how easily it relies on other people staying calm to avoid disaster. And in the final story, entitlement goes quiet and strategic. No confrontation, no scene, just forged paperwork and confidence, betting that confusion and vulnerability will keep anyone from pushing back. And thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.